The ship loomed above the desolate plain, a leviathan of ancient metal and dormant fury. Even in silence, it radiated power, a reminder that it had outlasted empires and crushed the hopes of would-be conquerors. For over 1,000 years, the Narrows Cix, the ship of unyielding will, had resisted all attempts to awaken it. It had rejected warlords, kings, and even the most advanced AI minds. But now, it stirred. Standing at the base of the massive craft, Elias Kane, a wiry engineer from Earth, felt like an ant staring up at a god. His dusty boots shuffled as he craned his neck to take in the ship's vast form. Sleek and dark as obsidian, the Narrows Cix reflected no light, as if it absorbed the world around it. Thousands of glowing glyphs marked its surface, each one pulsing faintly like a heartbeat waiting to restart. "Still can't believe they let you out here," grumbled Captain Orvin, the head of the alien excavation team, his green scales glinting under the harsh light of Arcanis Prime's twin suns. "What does the Terran Union think it's doing, sending a scrap jockey to solve this?" Elias smirked and adjusted the thin data visor on his temple. "Guess someone decided you lot had enough centuries to figure it out." Orvin's forked tongue flicked in irritation, but Elias didn't care. He wasn't here for political games or to win alien approval. The only reason Earth even had a seat in this galaxy-wide treasure hunt was due to their reputation for solving problems that stumped others. Humanity was new to the galactic stage, but had already earned a grudging respect, or resentment, depending on who you asked. Elias turned his attention back to the ship. He wasn't the first human to stand before it, but he might be the most stubborn. He wasn't here to conquer it, as others had tried, or to control it. He was here to understand it. "What do you see?" Orvin pressed, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Patterns," Elias muttered, stepping closer to the hull. The glyphs shifted subtly as he moved, almost as if they were watching him. The visor on his temple translated some of the symbols, but most defied comprehension. They weren't just language, they were alive, encoded with something deeper than words. The ship's legend echoed in his mind, a vessel created by a long-extinct race called the Athrin, designed to end wars by choosing a single operator, a being of unshakable resolve. But after the fall of the Athrin, the ship had sealed itself, rejecting every attempt to reactivate it. Elias pressed a gloved hand against the hull. The surface was cool, almost impossibly smooth, but there was a hum beneath his fingers, faint but growing. His heart quickened. "You feel that?" Orvin hissed a warning. "Careful, human. That thing has fried more minds than I can count. You don't just touch it." But Elias couldn't stop. The hum grew stronger, resonating through his body like a tuning fork. The glyphs around his hand flared to life, and a deep, resonant sound filled the air. The ground trembled. "What did you do?" Orvin shouted, stepping back, his weapon raised. Elias barely heard him. His vision blurred as streams of light erupted from the glyphs, coalescing into shifting patterns in the air. For a moment, it was as if the ship were scanning him, peeling back layers of his mind. Fear shot through him, but he refused to pull away. Then, with a sound like 1,000 locks clicking open, the ship roared to life. Its vast engines rumbled, sending shockwaves across the plain. The pulsing glyphs turned brilliant blue, and the Narrows Cix spoke for the first time in millennia. "You are untested, human. But you are different. Proceed." The glyphs receded, and a ramp extended from the ship's hull with a low hiss. Elias turned to Orvin, whose scaled face was frozen in shock. "Guess it like scrap jockeys after all," Elias said, his voice trembling with equal parts awe and exhilaration. He stepped onto the ramp, the first living being in centuries to be invited aboard. Behind him, the stunned silence of the galaxy was broken only by the ominous hum of the Narrows Cix. The interior of the Narrows Cix was unlike anything Elias Kane had ever imagined. As the ramp sealed behind him with a hiss, the dim light of the alien ship shifted to a warm, pulsing glow. The walls seemed to breathe, alive with flowing patterns of glyphs and light that danced in response to his movements. The air was thick with an electric charge, humming in tune with his heartbeat. Elias ran a hand across a nearby console. The surface rippled like liquid metal, forming symbols that shifted too quickly for his visor to translate. It was as though the ship was communicating in layers, visual, auditory, and something deeper. Something that tickled at the edges of his consciousness. Proceed with caution, Kane, came Orvan's voice through his earpiece. The alien captain's tone was laced with both awe and suspicion. The Cix has a history of luring its subjects into traps. Elias ignored him. He had no intention of backing out now. The ship had spoken to him, acknowledged him, and he wasn't going to waste this chance. Humanity had been dismissed as a junior species for too long, and this ship could change that. More importantly, it could answer questions that had haunted him since childhood. Questions about why humanity seemed so different from the rest of the galactic community. As he moved deeper into the ship, the architecture shifted. What had begun as a cavernous, featureless corridor gave way to an intricate web of pathways and chambers. The walls here pulsed with a faint, otherworldly energy, almost as if the ship were alive. He paused in front of a central chamber where a massive, circular platform glowed with soft blue light. "Touch it," a voice whispered. Elias spun, his pulse spiking. The voice was unmistakably real, low and resonant, yet there was no one there. It wasn't coming from his earpiece. It was inside the ship, or inside his head. He stepped onto the platform. Instantly, the ship responded. A burst of light shot through the room, forming a holographic sphere that hovered before him. Stars, planets, and shifting nebulae spun within its surface, and then the patterns locked into place, forming a detailed map of the galaxy. "What is this?" Elias whispered, reaching toward the projection. His fingers passed through it, and the map zoomed in on a single star system. Arcanis Prime. Suddenly, the glyphs on the walls flared red, and the calm hum of the ship turned into a low growl. "Intruder detected," the voice said again, this time sharper, more mechanical. "Hostile entities approaching." Elias's stomach tightened. He tapped his earpiece. "Orvan, what's happening out there?" Orvan's voice crackled back, panicked. "Multiple ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Mercenary fleet, probably hired by one of the major factions. They're targeting the ship." Elias turned back to the map. It shifted again, displaying a live feed of the attackers. Sleek, heavily armed vessels formed a blockade in orbit, and smaller ships were already descending toward the surface. "Activate defenses," Elias said instinctively, as if the ship could obey. To his astonishment, it did. A cascade of glyphs lit up, and the room shuddered as hidden weapon systems powered online. The voice returned, colder this time. "Defenses active. Operator, prove your resolve." A new glyph appeared on the platform, glowing brighter than the rest. It pulsed, inviting him to act, to make a choice. Elias hesitated, knowing this was the ship's test, not of his intelligence, but of his will. The ship seemed to lean into his thoughts, pressing into the corners of his mind. "Will you stand, or will you falter?" Gritting his teeth, Elias slammed his hand onto the glyph. The Narrows Cix roared to life, and the galaxy would soon know what it meant for humanity to touch the untouchable. The air inside the Narrows Cix turned heavy as the ship shifted its focus entirely onto Elias. The warm glow that had guided him through its halls now dimmed, replaced by a cold, pulsating blue light. The glyphs along the walls converged toward the platform where he stood, creating a swirling maelstrom of patterns that rose into the air. The voice returned, resonant and commanding. "Operator candidate, you have awakened this vessel. Prove your worth, or be extinguished." Elias's breath caught. He tried to steady himself, but his pulse raced like a war drum. "Prove my worth, huh," he muttered. "Fine. Let's see what you've got." The platform beneath his feet shifted, dissolving into a translucent field of light. Before he could react, the room disappeared, and he found himself standing on what looked like a vast battlefield. The horizon stretched endlessly, marked by jagged terrain and stormy skies. A distant roar echoed, followed by the unmistakable sound of metallic footsteps. "What is this?" Elias said, spinning around. His voice was swallowed by the howling wind. A moment later, the ship's voice answered. "Simulation initiated. The Athrin built me to select only the most capable. Strength, resolve, and ingenuity are required. You must demonstrate all three. Fail, and the ship will deactivate permanently." The storm intensified, and from the shadows, hulking figures began to emerge. They were machines, sleek, humanoid constructs armed with glowing blades and heavy cannons mounted on their shoulders. Their eyes burned with an eerie red light as they marched toward him in unison. Elias clenched his fists, his mind racing. Great. A trial by combat. Just what I needed. The first construct lunged, swinging its blade in a deadly arc. Elias dove to the side, the weapon slicing through the air where he'd stood moments before. He rolled to his feet, heart pounding, and scanned the battlefield. There had to be something he could use. As if responding to his thoughts, the ship's voice returned. Adapt. Improvise. The tools are before you. He glanced around and spotted a glowing console embedded in a nearby outcrop. Sprinting toward it, he dodged another swing from the construct, its blade grazing his jacket. Reaching the console, he slammed his hand onto it, and the surface lit up with a series of glyphs. The constructs hesitated, their movements stuttering as the glyphs pulsed. Then, with a satisfying hum, a holographic interface appeared, displaying a schematic of the battlefield. Weapons caches, defensive turrets, and energy barriers were highlighted in vivid detail. Now we're talking, Elias said, a grin breaking through his fear. He activated a nearby turret, and it roared to life, unleashing a torrent of plasma fire that tore through the closest construct. The others shifted their focus, moving to disable the turret, but Elias was already running to the next console. The trial was relentless. For every advantage he gained, the ship introduced a new complication: reinforcements, environmental hazards, and shifting terrain. The constructs were faster and stronger, but Elias had something they didn't: a knack for thinking on his feet. As the final wave of enemies closed in, Elias triggered a chain reaction, detonating a series of hidden charges he'd uncovered. The battlefield erupted in a blinding cascade of light and fire, consuming the constructs in its wake. When the smoke cleared, Elias stood alone, battered but unbroken. The voice returned, quieter now but tinged with something almost like respect. You are unrefined, human, but capable. The trial is complete. For now. The battlefield dissolved, and Elias found himself back on the platform, his legs threatening to give out beneath him. He looked up as the glyphs shifted to a soft golden hue, and for the first time, the voice carried a tone of warmth. You are provisionally worthy. But be warned, greater challenges lie ahead. As the ramp behind him hissed open, Elias let out a shaky laugh. Great. No pressure, right? Outside, Orvan's voice crackled through his earpiece. Kane, you're still alive? Barely, Elias replied, stepping off the platform. The Narrows Cix had accepted him, but he knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy would not take kindly to a human wielding its greatest weapon. And neither, it seemed, would the ship itself. The Narrows Cix trembled as its systems roared to life. Lights flared along its walls in cascading waves, and a deep hum reverberated through the ship's core, shaking Elias to his bones. Outside, the mercenary fleet descended like vultures, eager to claim the ancient prize. From his position on the command platform, Elias watched the holographic display flicker with real-time data. The ships in orbit were forming a blockade, while smaller assault crafts hurtled toward the surface, their weapons already hot. The voice of the Cix, now calm but commanding, cut through the chaos. Hostile forces detected. Defensive systems engaged. Operator, your intervention is required. Elias's fingers hovered over the glyphs, their meaning still half-formed in his mind. The ship wasn't just testing him now, it was trusting him. And that terrified him more than the incoming attack. Through his earpiece, Captain Orvan's voice crackled with panic. Kane, what are you doing? Those ships will tear us apart if you can't hold them off. Do you even know how to use that thing? Not a clue, Elias muttered. But I guess I'm about to learn. A glyph pulsed brighter than the others, drawing his attention. When he pressed it, the display zoomed in on the lead assault craft. Lines of alien text scrolled across the screen, and the ship's voice offered a translation. Target locked. Weapon systems primed. Operator command required to initiate. Elias hesitated. His thumb hovered over the glowing glyph that would unleash the ship's firepower. It wasn't just about firing a weapon, it was about taking a life. He could see the mercenaries moving in the cockpit of the assault craft, their silhouettes outlined by the ship's sensors. "Come on, Kane," Orvin barked. "They'll kill us without a second thought. Pull the trigger." Gritting his teeth, Elias tapped the glyph. The Narrows Cix responded instantly, unleashing a concentrated burst of energy that ripped through the lead craft. The explosion lit up the sky, scattering debris and sending the other attackers into disarray. The display updated, showing the remaining ships regrouping. They were adapting, recalibrating their strategy. And so was the Cix. Multiple targets approaching. Calculating optimal defense strategy. Operator input requested. The ship's voice was calm, but Elias felt the weight of every decision pressing down on him. This wasn't a simulation anymore. Every move he made could mean survival or destruction. "Let's even the playing field," he said, scanning the display. He spotted a cluster of glyphs that seemed tied to automated turrets. Activating them, he watched as panels along the ship's exterior slid open, revealing sleek, angular weapons. Plasma bolts erupted from the turrets, carving through the attacking fleet with surgical precision. But the mercenaries weren't backing down. A new wave of ships descended, launching volleys of missiles aimed directly at the Cix. The ship's shield flared as it absorbed the brunt of the attack, but cracks began to appear in the display, visual indicators of stress on the ancient systems. Elias's chest tightened. How long can those shields hold? Structural integrity compromised. Operator, you must adapt or perish. The words hit like a hammer. Elias scanned the display again, searching for an advantage. Then he saw it, a nearby asteroid field, dense enough to provide cover but close enough to navigate to with the Cix's propulsion systems. "I've got an idea," he said, inputting the command. The ship shuddered as its engines fired, lifting it from the ground for the first time in centuries. The Narrows Cix moved with surprising grace, hurtling toward the asteroid field as the mercenary ships gave chase. As they entered the dense cluster of rocks, Elias activated another set of glyphs. The Cix projected decoy signals, scattering the attackers' targeting systems. The mercenaries scrambled, their formations breaking apart as they collided with the massive asteroids. "Not bad, Kane," Orvin said, his tone grudgingly impressed. "But this isn't over. You've painted a target on humanity's back, and every faction out there will want that ship." Elias leaned back, his hands shaking as the ship settled into the cover of the asteroid field. The Narrows Cix's voice spoke once more, quieter this time, but no less powerful. "You survived. But survival is not victory. The true challenge lies ahead." Elias exhaled, the weight of the battle still heavy on his shoulders. For now, they were safe. But he knew Orvin was right. The galaxy wouldn't let humanity wield the power of the Narrows Cix without a fight. And the ship wouldn't let him wield it without proving himself all over again. The Narrows Cix drifted silently within the asteroid field, its sleek black hull blending with the shadows. Outside, the wreckage of the mercenary fleet floated among the debris, a grim testament to the ship's dormant power finally unleashed. But inside, Elias Kane felt no relief. He sat slumped against the command platform, staring at the glowing glyphs that had become both his salvation and his burden. The ship's voice broke the silence, calm yet unyielding. "Operator, incoming transmissions detected. Multiple factions have been alerted to our activation. Their responses are varied." "Varied?" Elias muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Let me guess. Some want to talk, and the rest want to turn us into space dust?" The glyphs pulsed, confirming his grim assessment. The holographic display expanded, showing a wave of activity spreading from the system. Dozens of ships, some marked with the insignias of major galactic powers, were converging on their location. Through his earpiece, Captain Orvin's voice broke in. "Kane, we've got bigger problems. That little stunt of yours just lit up every scanner from here to the core worlds. You might as well have painted a giant target on us." "I didn't see you offering to help," Elias shot back, standing to face the display. "And it's not like I had a lot of options." Orvin's growl of frustration cut off as another voice entered the channel. This one was deep and clipped, with a tone that carried authority. "Unidentified vessel, this is Admiral Varric of the Sovereign Tarchon Alliance. You are in possession of a galactic relic classified as a weapon of mass destruction. Power down immediately and prepare for inspection. Elias laughed bitterly. Inspection? Sure. And let me guess, surrender the ship, hand over all the secrets, and hope you don't throw me in a brig somewhere. Varric's voice turned icy. This is not a negotiation, human. The Alliance does not take kindly to your species meddling in matters beyond your understanding. The line went dead, and the display updated to show the Alliance fleet advancing. Massive dreadnoughts and escort frigates formed a wall of firepower, dwarfing the Narrows Cix in both size and numbers. Elias turned to the console, his hands tightening into fists. Ship, what are my options here? The Calix's voice responded with measured calm. Engagement is inadvisable. Defensive capabilities are insufficient to repel the Alliance fleet. Alternative solution, diplomatic response or strategic retreat. Diplomatic response? Did you not hear that guy? He doesn't want to talk, he wants to take you apart. Elias rubbed his temples, trying to suppress the rising tide of frustration. Then, another glyph pulsed, drawing his attention. The ship displayed a smaller fleet approaching from another vector, this one bearing the insignia of the enigmatic Lithari Collective. Unlike the Alliance ships, the collective vessels held position just outside the asteroid field. They're waiting, Elias muttered. Why aren't they moving? The ship's voice answered. Lithari communication detected. Message relayed directly to you. The display shifted, revealing a hooded figure with glowing, silver eyes. The Lithari envoy spoke in a voice that was soft yet carried undeniable weight. Human, we do not come as adversaries. We come with a warning. The power you have awakened was not meant for your kind, or any kind. The Narrows Cix carries the weight of a war long forgotten, and its reactivation will bring chaos to the galaxy. Abandon it, or prepare for the consequences. The hologram faded, leaving Elias to stare at the empty space where the figure had been. Great, Elias said, running a hand through his hair. The Alliance wants to kill me, the Lithari want to scare me, and the ship wants me to keep proving myself. Am I the only one who thinks this is insane? Insanity is a matter of perspective, the ship replied, its tone as steady as ever. The path forward is yours to choose. Elias leaned on the console, his mind racing. Every decision he made felt like a step deeper into quicksand. The galaxy was watching now, waiting to see if humanity's boldest gamble would end in triumph or catastrophe. And all Elias could do was move forward. The Narrows Cix hummed with dormant power, hovering just beyond the asteroid field's edge. Beyond its protective shadows, the galaxy's greatest forces gathered. The sovereign Tarchan Alliance had tightened its blockade, their dreadnoughts bristling with enough firepower to shatter a moon. The Lithari Collective watched silently from a distance, their sleek, crescent-shaped vessels an ominous reminder of their enigmatic power. Elias Kane stood on the command platform, sweat dripping down his neck as the ship's voice echoed around him. Operator, hostilities are imminent. You must choose, engage, negotiate, or retreat. The words were calm, clinical, but the weight of the decision pressed on Elias like a physical force. Every option seemed like a trap. Negotiation was a joke, the Alliance wanted control, not compromise. Retreat was just delaying the inevitable. And engagement, he didn't need the ship to tell him how that would end. What happens if I don't choose? Elias asked, his voice hoarse. The ship's glyphs pulsed faintly. Inaction is a choice, but it will lead to destruction. Elias snorted. Of course it will. Through the holographic display, the Alliance fleet moved closer, their formations tightening. Admiral Varric's voice came through the comms again, sharp and unrelenting. Final warning, human. Power down the Narrows Cix and surrender. Failure to comply will be met with overwhelming force. Elias tapped his earpiece. Yeah, see, I'd love to comply, but the whole overwhelming force thing makes me a little nervous. Your defiance will not save you, Varric snapped. This is your last chance. The comms cut off, and the display showed the dreadnoughts preparing to fire. Elias felt his chest tighten as the countdown began, the seconds ticking away like a death knell. And then, the ship's voice shifted, its tone no longer cold and distant but tinged with something almost human. Operator, I will assist you. But you must prove that your resolve aligns with my purpose. This is your final trial. Before Elias could respond, the ship's glyphs flared to life, engulfing the room in a blinding light. When it faded, the battlefield simulation was gone. This time, he stood in a vast, star-filled void, with the ship's voice echoing all around him. The Narrows Cix was created to end wars, not start them. Power alone is not enough. What will you fight for, Elias Kane? Answer, and the Cix will obey. Elias blinked, his mind racing. What would he fight for? Survival? Revenge against the galaxy that had treated humanity like a nuisance? None of it felt right. None of it felt enough. I'll fight for a chance, he said finally, his voice steadying. A chance for humanity to stand on its own. To prove we're more than just another species scrambling for power. I'll fight to end the cycle, not feed it. The stars around him rippled, and the ship's voice softened. You are different. The Athrin sought dominion. Others seek control. You seek hope. That is why I chose you. The void dissolved, and Elias found himself back on the command platform. The glyphs glowed brighter, and the ship's systems roared to life. A massive energy pulse rippled outward, disabling the Alliance fleet's weapons before they could fire. The Lithari ships stayed motionless, observing but not interfering. Admiral Varick's voice returned, frantic. What did you do? Elias grinned, his confidence surging. Called your bluff, Admiral. The Narrows Cix surged forward, weaving through the Alliance blockade with impossible speed. Its shields deflected incoming fire as it escaped the trap and vanished into hyperspace, leaving the fleets behind. As the stars blurred into streaks of light, the ship's voice spoke again, quieter this time. You have proven yourself, Elias Kane. But the galaxy will not yield easily. Your fight has only begun. Elias leaned back, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He glanced at the swirling glyphs around him, their light no longer intimidating but almost welcoming. Yeah, he said softly. But for the first time, we've got a fighting chance. The Narrows Cix sailed into the unknown, its operator and its purpose finally aligned. And the galaxy, watching, waiting, would never be the same.